just to start off, just to remind everyone, we're looking. Our series of calls here is Creating Your Ideal Life, Distilling Wisdom from Books, in which I've selected some of the most influential, inspirational books that have had an impact on me personally. So it's just my personal opinion on this, but I like to share them with other people. And in doing so, it means I go back through the book and relearn some of the things I might have read before and forgotten, or perhaps learn some new things that are relevant to me now that might not have been relevant to me before. And welcome to Coralie, to joining us in the call, all the way from New Zealand. Awesome. Better late than never, as they say. And you haven't missed anything yet. Don't worry. It was just me spouting off introduction. So we're here to look at 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. R Covey. We're continuing our review of that we've already started over the last few weeks. And in the previous weeks, we have covered the starting part of the book, the first part of the book, which was part 1 was Paradigms and Principles. So that was really an introduction and an overview of him saying that we start with working from the inside out. So we look at ourselves first, because we're the only people we can control. We can hope to influence other people, whereas we can directly influence ourselves. So, but if we don't sort ourselves out, we can't hope to have any impact on other people. And then he gave a quick overview of what the 7 habits is all about and why he wrote the book and so on. And then we moved into the principle of the substance of what he's saying. So part 2 is private victory. So following on from this concept of working on yourself first and working from the inside out, he talked about principles of personal vision and being proactive. So not just proactive in the sense of the management sense of doing something now of your own accord rather than reacting to somebody else's actions and decisions. Talking about your vision, really about setting up a vision for your life, a mission for yourself, figuring out what you really want to do, and segueing into habit 2. So habit 1 there was be proactive. Habit 2 was to begin with the end in mind. So really figuring out, what is your long-term game? What do you want to achieve? What do you want your life to be all about? What's the meaning of life? Dun dun dun. The big question we all like to ask ourselves. We all know the answer is actually 42, because you watched that movie. But what is your personal mission? What do you want to be remembered for? If somebody was giving a eulogy for you, what would you want it to say? So if you start with the end in mind, you have something to work towards. And he delved then into some of the principles of personal leadership. This following on with this theory that you need to work on yourself first before you can work on other people. And habit 3, putting first things first. So are you actually working on the right things? Are you climbing the right, is your ladder against the right wall, is one of the things that he brought up there. And you could be making progress, but are you making progress in the right direction? So is it in line with that end game or that long-term vision that you have? Or are you just, again, responding to the world around you and being drifted along? Like Jim Rohn used to say, the wind is always blowing. It's how you set your sail is what counts. So you can then guide yourself to be working towards the right direction. So principles of personal management. So there was this concept of moving from dependence, where we start out as children being dependent on our parents for our own survival, and then going through school being dependent on our teachers and so on. And as we mature and grow, we become independent. That realization that actually your parents did know a bit about what they were talking about. They weren't crazy after all. And suddenly you have to figure things out for yourself, and you become independent and start making your own life, your decisions and so on. Well, then he talks about the conceptual movement from independence to interdependence. So the realization that you can't do it all alone. You need other people to achieve anything really in life. When you think back at what you've achieved already, there's all along the way, there's been other people who have played their part. in helping you to get where you are today. So whenever you're successful at anything, there's always been some coaches or mentors or role models or friends, family, associates, people along the way, teachers, people that have given you advice, support when you needed it, corrected your behavior when it wasn't as ideal as it might have been, and guided you along the way to get where you are. So once we realize that, we really do need other people around us, and that's why our interpersonal skills become so paramount, so important. And so the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is really focusing in on why are some people successful and other people are less so. What is it that makes the difference? And with these habits, Stephen has sought to delve into the human psyche and analyze what makes the difference. So part 3, public victory, we started on that. We covered just the introduction of that last week, which was the paradigms of interdependence. And we move today towards habit 4. Before we go into habit 4, does anyone else have any comments or realizations or anything they want to share from what we've covered so far? It's quite a big chunk of the book so far. Just for Coralie's benefit, Stan is with us in sound only because he's having some internet issues, so he's not got any video, but he is there. He squirreled away.
That was a lovely summary, a beautiful, succinct summary, Tony.
Thank you. I did my best. All right. So if no one's got anything else to add to that at the moment, rather than taking up time with rehashing what we've already covered, if you want to go back on that, watch the videos, and I'll be putting them up so you can do that. We're going into public victory. Now, the thing I picked up straight away on that is just an important point to mention is that public victory is not a victory over the public. It is about, we've talked about private victory being the working on yourself aspect that needs to happen first. As he said, if you don't work on yourself, you don't get your own house in order, you can't really hope to influence other people. Well, the public victory is about where you gain the skills, resources, habits, attitudes that you need in order to be able to influence and inspire other people around you. So thinking, and we're going nicely segueing into this 4th habit, which is think win-win. So it's not about a victory over people, it's about a victory with people. It's about us all winning if we can. So this really, he's called it Think Win-Win, the habit 4, with the subtitle of Principles of Interpersonal Leadership. Now, it's a big chapter, I realized as I was rereading it. And as V pointed out to me last week, so we'll see how we go and what sort of comments and feedback or input everyone has as to how far we get, whether we can get on to habit 5. We may. We'll see how we go for time. So habit 4. Right. Excuse me, I'll just turn to the appropriate page. Think win-win. And this is probably, when I think back, I read this book many years ago, and I think this is probably the biggest aspect of all of his philosophy that really sunk in with me, and something that I've always tried to adopt as a business owner and entrepreneur, is always to look for the win-win. If you win, so he breaks down the different combinations of this. If you win and somebody else loses, do you really win? In business, you probably don't in the long run. You might win the battle, as they say, but you won't win the war. If you have an argument with a customer, and I probably really had this reinforced to me in my service roles in retail management and having to deal with complaints, people bringing products back that didn't work, or that, had worked for a week and then broken, or all sorts of things that people returned and quite often were quite emotionally disturbed about why this product didn't work and what an inconvenience it had been and all these sorts of things. And so you learn to negotiate that You could refuse to give a refund or refuse someone what they were seeking, but in the long term, you might end up losing a customer if you did that. So it was always the biggest thing that I picked up as a retail manager in dealing with those situations was people want to be heard, people want to be understood, and that's why it's so important to develop those empathy skills, because how frustrating it is when you are the customer and you're complaining about something that's not right with a product or a service, and the people you're complaining to appear not to be listening to you. They don't really get what you're saying, why, and they think you're just whinging unnecessarily. Don't you feel disgruntled that you cannot, that they don't understand me, they don't hear what I'm saying? I'm sure we've all had that experience. So it's the big thing is, how do we look for a way that we can win and they can win? So maybe we might have to change the way we look at things sometimes, change our paradigm. It doesn't mean go into some of the alternatives, one of which is lose-win. So lose-win might be, I'll just give you whatever you want just to keep you happy so you keep coming back. That's not a win. That's lose-win. That's where if you keep on losing, it really is, as he talks about in this chapter, is probably a sign of low self-esteem, or you're setting yourself up to be trodden on and treated as a doormat. If you're always losing and the other person's winning, especially when it comes to relationships, and you think about how many times people in relationships repeat these patterns. I think we talked about it last week with the girl that used to work for me, used to come in with a black eye and always said it was her fault because she'd caused her boyfriend to get so irate that he'd end up hitting her. How was that her fault, But she was setting herself up for lose-win, but didn't realize it, obviously. So what he says here is, I thought this was interesting. When we're talking in terms of where it can go wrong, well, he says, whether you're the president of a company or the janitor, the moment you step from independence into interdependence in any capacity, you step into a leadership role. You're in a position of influencing other people, and the habit of effective interpersonal leadership is to think win-win. He says win-win is not a technique, it's a total philosophy of human interaction. So it's not just something plasticky that you can follow a script and you automatically become a win-win person. It's about genuinely and authentically seeking to understand the other person and looking for a way that they can win as well as you winning. And if there's multiple parties involved, how can we make it so everyone gets a win out of this? No one's disadvantaged unfairly. So he describes these different paradigms of interaction. So there's win-lose, lose-win, lose-lose. How bad is that one? Win and win-win, which is the good one, or no deal. Well, is it the good one? Is it the good one? Well, win-win is based on the paradigm that there is plenty for everybody and that one person's success is not achieved at the expense or exclusion of the success of others. So there's an underlying principle there that he explores, and that is the concept of abundance rather than scarcity. If you think there's only so much to go around, thanks Joe for my tea. If you think there's only so much to go around, then people become concerned, worried that somebody else is going to take their share, and we're going to suffer if there's, if they get the sale and we don't, we're destroyed. What if there's other people out there you can sell to? What if you lose a few customers, but there's still millions to go for? What if you lose that deal and there's millions of deals to go for? So it's not your way or my way, it's a better way. It's looking for a higher way. He talked about this win-lose scenario, and he very much emphasizes the point that our society's been set up to really support that win-lose structure. In terms of, for instance, just starting with school, the academic world, reinforces win-lose scripting, as he says, because you got an A because someone else got a C. So it doesn't actually measure people against, or as he says, people not graded against their potential or against the full use of their present capacity. They're graded in relation to other people. So he made the point, you might have two children and one is getting A's, but they're coasting along and not really trying. And others getting C, but they're working their socks off. Yet what tends to happen is the one getting the A's gets rewarded and praised for getting the A's, and the one who's and they're not trying, and the one who's getting the C, but they're working their socks off, gets criticized and put down because they're not getting the results. So it starts in school. He then goes on to say it also continues, and this is partly school, but as you go into sport, because we're big sports players here in Australia, athletics or any sort of sports that people get involved in, there tends to be a winner and a loser, and you can only win if the other person loses. What about the fact that someone might have beaten their personal best and they've really pushed themselves to do that, yet they still come third in the race? Who do we remember? Who do we focus on? The one who won the race. And yet the third place person might have done a superhuman effort to get to where they were. And what about the person who just to cross the finish line is an achievement? I told a story in my book about the swimmer, the African swimmer. I can't think of his name. Eric something's gone right out of my head. You might remember it from the Olympics a few years back, quite a long time ago actually now. And he finished this swimming race where he was way slower than everybody else, and he got a standing ovation when he finished. They were almost at the point of closing the pool, I think, by the time he actually got to the end of the race. Everyone else had finished and packed up and gone home, and he was still there swimming because he was that slow. But you find out later that he didn't even have a swimming pool to practice in where he came from, and he got a standing ovation just for finishing the race, just for turning up and being there and doing it. So sometimes it's just the compete. It's like participating rather than the competing. It's being there and doing your best. Then we have law as another example. You know, in law there tends to be, there's a dispute going on, and there has to be a winner and a loser, doesn't there? But if you can seek a result where both people win, which is sometimes hard to do. So the point is, our society creates this environment of a win-lose paradigm. But we can challenge that. We said we don't want to see lose-win. It can be seen as capitulation. Or is it? Well, he goes on to say, he asked this question, of all these 5 philosophies, win-win, win-lose, lose-win, lose-lose, and win, which is the most effective? And the answer is, it depends. I thought that was an intriguing twist as you're reading along in this book, because you're expecting it to be win-win every time. No, it's not necessarily, because as he says, if you work in a regional office that's miles away from another regional office and you don't have any functional relationship between the offices, you may want to compete in a win-lose situation to stimulate business. However, you don't want a win-lose situation like the Race to Bermuda contest, that is one example he gave there, where you need cooperation among people or groups of people to achieve maximum success. If you value a relationship and the issue isn't really that important, you may want to go for lose-win in some circumstances to genuinely affirm the other person. So there might be a time where you do kind of agree to take the loss so that the other person wins because you value the relationship. But if you're doing it consciously, and saying what I want isn't as important to me as my relationship with you, and let's do it your way this time, that doesn't mean you always adopt that philosophy. You don't fall into that habit of being the perpetual loser. V.
I keep thinking about what he also wrote about earlier with the emotional bank account. I guess it all depends on how the transaction is going to affect the relationship. And I know from my family, you know, there was always digs all the time between people, emptying our emotional bank account and creating resentment that just carried on and just kept festering. So as opposed to actually being empowered and saying, I'm going to give you this one because you really want it and I love you.
Yeah, you've experienced it firsthand. Definitely. I know from what you've told me in the past, or some of the stories that you've shared, you've been through that example. Coralie, you seem like you want to add something to that.
Sort of. I just found when I was reading that last night that I think you hear a lot about things being win-win or win-lose. But then when it was saying about the lose-win, I'm like, oh, well, I'm just reading my autobiography there. But, you know, that's something that I've done heaps.
Right.
And yeah, it was interesting that it was in there, because I just always only sort of thought of things as that win-win or win-lose thing. And because I'm not having a part of that win-lose thing, and I want everything to be win-win, but I quite often go for the lose-win thing.
Yeah, and maybe not even realizing that you're doing it.
Yeah, sometimes.
There was an example in here of that, which I can't find right off the top of my head now, where one of his clients thought that he was actually negotiating, and then realized that the other people had wiped the floor with him in the negotiation. And he said, so what do we call that when you lose and they win? But he didn't see that he'd actually lost. You know, he didn't realize it. But because if it's an underlying paradigm, it becomes your way of the way things ought to be in your world, and you may not even realize that you've allowed that situation to occur.
Yeah.
So it's only when you step back and you look at things with a sort of helicopter view and analyze what's going on, that you may actually realize that, yeah, you might have been doing that for quite some time and not even knowing that was your default setting.
Yeah.
And this is the point that he's making, really, is you could do it by choice in certain situations. It shouldn't be your default setting, though.
I like how he went on from that story as well, and he talks about to create the win-win is to just keep negotiating. It's just not giving in. It's keep negotiating and keeping the end in mind for both parties to be able to receive the win. Yes,
very much so. To summarize that sort of section of which option is best, he says the best choice then depends on reality. The challenge is to read that reality accurately and not to translate win, lose, or other scripting into every situation. So as I just said, not have that as your default script, that you always fall back on that without even realizing that you're doing it. So as he said, I might win in a negotiation, but will I really win in the long term? My short-term win will really be a long-term lose if I don't get your repeat business. So an interdependent win-lose is really lose-lose in the long run. All right. This was an interesting one. So we have win-win or no deal. It might be that no deal means that if we can't find a solution that would benefit both of us, then we agree to disagree agreeably. So we can both sort of go, well, look, if we can't work this out and you're not happy and I'm not happy, then it's better that we walk away than one of us be the winner and the other one lose, because it's not going to work in the long run for us. And that's a mature approach, isn't it? That's when you realize that a win-lose is not really a long-term win. And it actually, as he says, you feel when you have that as an option, the option to walk away and have no deal, you feel liberated, because you have no need to try to manipulate people or to push your own agenda or drive for what you want. So you can actually then say, when you have that no deal as an option, you can then say, I only want to go for win-win. I want to win, and I want you to win. I wouldn't want to get my way and have you not feel good about it, because yes, it will fester then, won't it? It'll be, well, I've given in to them, but I'm not really happy about it. And what we've seen that in in family situations, we've seen it in business situations. The person who agrees but doesn't really agree, they're only begrudgingly agreeing because they feel like you've forced them into a situation. They don't really agree at all, do they? And it's going to go and fester away, and then it's going to come back at you at some future point, because they'll want to get their own back in some way if they feel like they've lost and you won and it was unfair. All right, well, it is a big chapter because he goes on then to 5 dimensions of win-win. So this this principle-centered personal leadership concept, principle of win-win, is fundamental to success in all of our interactions, and it embraces 5 interdependent dimensions of life. Drum roll, dun, 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 dun. The five interdependent dimensions are: it begins with character, moves towards relationships, out of which flow agreements. It is nurtured in an environment where structure and systems are based on win-win, and it involves process. We cannot achieve win-win ends with win-lose or lose-win means. Oh, right. Okay. Well, so what are these 5 dimensions? Well, character is the foundation of win-win, as we spoke about in earlier chapters there, and starting with the inside out. Everything else builds on that foundation. And he says there's 3 character traits that are essential if you want to pursue the win-win paradigm. The first is integrity, which he's defined already as the value that we place on ourselves. Maturity, the balance between courage and consideration. And he goes on to say there that many people think in dichotomies. They think in terms of either or, either this has to happen or that has to happen. If people think you're nice, you're not tough, like you have to be one or the other. But as he says, win-win is nice and tough, because you not only have to be nice, you also have to be courageous. You not only have to be empathic, you have to be confident. You not only have to be considerate and sensitive, you have to be brave. To do that, to achieve that balance between courage and consideration, is the essence of real maturity and is fundamental to win-win. The abundance mentality, as we talked about before there, that there is plenty out there for all of us. It's not a case of limited resources and, there's only 5 donuts, and if you get 4 of them, I only get 1, so you win and I lose. It's there's a whole world of donuts, or whatever the thing is that you're pursuing. I don't know why donuts popped into my head. Shouldn't be thinking about donuts at all at the moment. So let's erase that one from the recording. All right. Abundance, as I said right at the start, public victory doesn't mean victory over other people. It means success in effective interaction that brings mutually beneficial results to everyone involved.
It's victory over donuts. Oh no.
It is. Starts with victory over donuts, Sam, because that's victory over self and the health and safety issues that you're falling prey to. A character rich in integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality has a genuineness that goes far beyond technique or lack of it in human interaction. So people will forgive your mistakes, but if your character speaks for you, they know that you come from a genuine place with wholeheartedness, as Brene Brown likes to talk about. Then people will give you the benefit of the doubt there, because genuineness or authenticity is probably the most important trait, and people pick up when you're falsifying it. If you're trying to be something you're not, people pick up on it, don't they? You notice it in body language. You might not even notice it consciously, but you notice it subconsciously. So You think there's something dodgy about that person, but I just can't figure out what it is. Maybe it's the fact Stan hasn't got his video camera on. What's he trying to hide? I don't know. So we wonder. I'm only joking, Stan. We're not casting aspersions on your character, your good character. Relationships. From the foundation of character, we build and maintain win-win relationships. And as V alluded to before, if our emotional bank account is high, credibility is no longer an issue. Enough deposits have been made so that you know and I know that we deeply respect each other. We're focused on the issues, not on personalities or positions. Positions is something Rustavan talked about quite a lot. You know, with when you take a position, you create an opposition. But if you explore possibilities, it's more beneficial. Okay. How are we going? He asked genuinely.
Oh.
With great authenticity. Are we progressing now?
I got to spend a day with the horses yesterday, and that sums up character, sums it up completely, because if I'm trying to learn how to lead with them, how to have intention and how to give instructions and have them actually want to do, because there's no negative training with the horses at Waddy Farm. It's all just, you know, you let them do. They'll only follow you if they actually feel safe, and if you have character. If they can judge, they feel safe with you, and you have demonstrated that you have character, then it's easy. And it was effortless with this horse yesterday. I was just thinking what I wanted her to do, and she was doing it. So
horses have a reputation of being almost empathic, don't they? They just have very you have a real connection with a horse, don't you? Perhaps more than a lot of other animals.
Yeah, it's because they're so big and their organs are so big, and their energetic expression just expands.
Cool. All right. Well, he says the more genuine your character, the higher your level of proactivity, the more committed you really are to win-win, and the more powerful your influence will be with that other person. This is the real test of interpersonal leadership. It goes beyond transactional leadership into transformational leadership, transforming the individuals involved as well as the relationship. Powerful stuff. Agreements. So from relationships flow the agreements that give definition and direction to win-win, sometimes called performance agreements or partnership agreements. Shifting the paradigm of productive interaction from vertical to horizontal, from hovering supervision to self-supervision, from positioning to being partners in success. Good, important one. And again, relates back to that green and clean story that he talked about in Habit 3, where his son was keeping the backyard green and clean. If you remember, he had his responsibility to water the garden and look after it, and he neglected it. And how he handled that situation, how he developed in his son the willingness to take responsibility for that, the result, and to find solutions himself, even to ask his dad to help him out to get it back up to standard when he'd allowed the standard to drop. So if you can get people taking ownership of something rather than just being told what to do. So I've been reading a couple of books now. Was it in here that talked about go for delegation? Was it another book I was reading? There was two types of delegation. Go for delegation, which is where someone comes to go for this, go for that, go and fetch this, go and do that. You're very directional in terms of delegation. And the other one was what was the word? What's the word that will come to me in a moment? It was like, no, it wasn't statutory. What was it? It's gone right out of my head. But it was stewardship. That was it. Statutory stewardship, delegation. So where you give people stewardship of a situation. In other words, you make them feel that it's their baby. That you need help, you ask for it, or you need resources, you come up with them, or you come up with ideas. What we're interested in is you getting the result the best way you think it's going to work for you. So in other words, not micromanaging people, allowing people the freedom to be creative, allowing them to come up with their own solutions, but giving them the support that they can ask for help if they need it as well. So in the win-win agreement, the following 5 elements are made very explicit. Desired results, not methods. Identify what is to be done and when. So rather than, we tend to focus a lot on that, telling people how to do things, instead of giving them the result that we're working towards achieving and letting them figure out some of the ideas themselves. Doesn't mean abdicating and not having anything further to do with it, but allowing them to come up with their own solutions, their own ideas. Guidelines, specifying parameters, so putting some boundaries around things within which results are to be accomplished. That might include things like policies, company policies, procedures, certain things that they have to be aware of. Resources, identifying the human, financial, technical, or organizational support available to help accomplish the results. Accountability, so setting up the standards of performance and the time of evaluation. And consequences, specifying good and bad, natural and logical, what does and will happen as a result of the evaluation. So there's 5 elements there to a win-win agreement: desired results, guidelines, resources, accountability, and consequences. It's very interesting when it's sort of chunked down like that, isn't it? And then you think, well, if any agreements that you may have had in business, or even agreements with family members about how you're going to do something, agreement with his parents about what the child's going to do. If you actually incorporate those factors into it, you'd have quite a powerful agreement between you, which is what he did really with his son with the Green and Clean story.
Interesting how these are all 5 as well. Everything's coming in 5.
Ah, there you go. I thought 7 was supposed to be the magic number. It is interesting though, isn't it? So yes, sorry.
I was just saying about it's the 7 habits.
Yeah. All right. So with the difference between learner-controlled instruction and system-controlled instruction, and gave some examples of trainees in a training program and how they were basically encouraging students to participate in what they think they need to learn in order to achieve the level of competence. That's a big thing now in vocational educational training, isn't it? Being assessed as competent, reaching a level of competence rather than getting a grade as such. And what do you need to do to prove that you are competent? So the focus then being on results rather than methods, but subject to all those criteria that you just mentioned. You've got to have guidelines, you've got policies you've got to adhere to, and so on. But with win-win accountability, people evaluate themselves, as his son did. Even a 7-year-old boy can tell himself, or can answer for himself, and analyze his own performance as to how well he's keeping that yard green and clean. And when he looks at it and it's dry and brown, he knows he's not performing the way he should be. And I love this. One of my old favorites, I used to read Peter Drucker, the management consultant, his books back when I was starting out as a young trainee manager at the age of 18. Management philosopher and consultant Peter Drucker recommends the use of a manager's letter to capture the essence of performance agreements between managers and their employees. So the idea being that the employee, after a lot of discussion and what the project is and what it involves and so on, that the employee then writes a letter that summarizes that discussion and summarizes when the next review or performance appraisal is going to take place and what they're committing to doing. And I think back to my early days working in retail in Australia, in Target, who sponsored me into the country. We used to do that as departmental managers. We used to have to write our own letter to our manager, to our store manager, each month about what our monthly objectives were for that next month and what resources we needed and which staff we would have involved and completion dates to achieve certain projects. That might be re-merchandising a whole department, or you know, moving things around basically and changing stuff, putting certain things into effect. How long would we take to do it? What resources would we need? When would it be done by? And so we're making a commitment to our store manager, and then he would sit down and assess how that was going. And at our morning tea meetings, we all had to, all the management team had to go together and have morning tea together and discuss these things, you know. Interesting, it comes back to parenting again, because business and parenting are quite similar with your staff. Quite often they're quite like children in lots of ways. He says there's 4 kinds of consequences, rewards and penalties that management or parents can control: financial, psychic, opportunity, and responsibility. So we've gone from 5 to 4 now. Notice that one, people. So 5. So these things were, what were the financial ones? Well, things like, you know, income, pocket money, stock options, allowances, or penalties. Psychic, I thought, was an interesting one: recognition, approval, respect, credibility, or loss of them. So that big, I always think of that word, the parental word. If you've not achieved the expectations, is I'm disappointed in you. Who wants to have someone disappointed in them?
Yeah,
you'd much rather have, well done, I'm very proud of you. So that's the psychic one. As opportunity includes training, development, perks, and other benefits. You know, if you get this done, if you get your room clean, you'll get to go to the theme park this afternoon, or, you know, go and play on the water slide, or whatever it is, or go to the movies if you get this done. So there's opportunity. Responsibility has to do with scope and authority, either of which can be enlarged or diminished. So you know, you might get to choose what time you go to bed tonight, or, you know, if you've done your homework or whatever it is, you know. So making people responsible and accountable, and changing that sort of paradigm where people start to think for themselves, and they start to think in terms of managing themselves and being responsible for the results. That old example about the children in bed going, if mum doesn't come and wake us up soon, we're going to be late for school. What about getting yourself up instead of waiting for mum to do it? So systems, in order for all these things to work, you need good systems. In any business, even in a family, in a, you know, how you run the household, you need certain systems, don't you? Decisions about where things belong, and, you know, a place for everything, and all that sort of stuff. But he says win-win can only survive in an organization when the systems support it. So there was an example where he was trying to motivate, the boss was trying to motivate his team, but you know, getting them all to work together. But at the end of the day, it was who's going to get the trip, who's going to win the trip at the end of to Bermuda, I think it was, wasn't it? At the end of the season, who's come out on top. Well, if you're creating a competitive edge between the people where they're actually in competition with each other, are they really going to be cooperative? Are they going to help each other get more sales? If it might mean that the other guy gets the trip and you don't. So you've got to be careful about how you set things up. Not just with that, he says for win-win to work, the systems have to support it. The training system, the planning system, the communication system, the budgeting system, the information system, the compensation system, and any other system you can think of, all have to be based on the principle of win-win, not win-lose. So in that example with the Bermuda sales competition, the winner would go to Bermuda, the loser wouldn't. So how are those people going to cooperate and work together for the same result? They're not, are they? They're actually, you're creating division between your own team without realizing you're doing it, and he didn't know he was doing it. Funny what you can see from the outside very often, isn't it? Can't see our own mistakes, but other people can see them quite easily sometimes. So often the problem is in the system, not in the results, and not in the people. If you put good people in bad systems, you get bad results. You have to water the flowers you want to grow. What a great line. And relating that back to that thing of P and PC, which was, who can remember what P and PC stood for?
Well, it's something about the goose and the eggs.
Very good. Yeah, P stands for
don't know
goose.
what the
PC stands for eggs. That's pretty much true. So production and production or performance capability. So looking after the goose lays the golden eggs. So you want to look after the goose in the long term, not just focus on the eggs. Because you can, if you take all the eggs away and you kill the goose, who's going to make the next eggs? Can't do it yourself, can you? Well, not unless you're a freak of nature or something. So, so processes, taking, you know, a step further, systems and processes. How do we do things? How do we look for things? He says, in my own work with various people and organizations seeking win-win solutions, I suggest that they become involved in the following 4-step process. We've got another 4 here again.
It's just because he always like one out, you see, like with the kids, he didn't say you could not feed them. No, then you'd have 5.
Uh-huh. Yes, I'm not sure what social services would say about that one.
Maybe it's a countdown. So we started with 7 habits.
Yeah, could be.
Somewhere with 6, 5, 4.
Like that, like the Christmas song, you know, so many days of Christmas. All right. Well, he goes on to say that there is a 4-step process for seeking win-win solutions. First, see the problem from the other point of view. Really seek to understand and to give expression to the needs and concerns of the other party, as well as, or better than they can themselves. Second, identify the key issues and concerns, not the positions involved. What are we really concerned about here? What are the real issues? What are we really trying to solve? Third, determine what results would constitute a fully acceptable solution. So this is really part of that performance agreement, isn't it? It's, you know, being clear about what would be a win for me, what would be a win for you, what's the outcome we're really trying to get here. And fourth, identify possible new options to achieve those results. So that's in terms of process. How are we going to get there? How are we going to get to those results? Other options. So as he says, habits 5 and 6 deal directly with 2 of those elements in this process, and we'll go into those in depth in the next 2 chapters. Right. But at this juncture, let me point out the highly interrelated nature of the process of win-win with the essence of win-win itself. You can only achieve win-win solutions with win-win processes. The end and the means are the same. And again, win-win is not a personality technique. It's not something you can just fabricate or pretend to do. It's a total paradigm of human interaction, and it comes from a character of integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality. It grows out of high trust relationships, and it is embodied in agreements that effectively clarify and manage expectations as well as accomplishments. It thrives in supportive systems, and it is achieved through the process we are now going to fully examine in habits 5 and 6, which we are not going to fully examine today because we are very close to running out of time. So I suspected, and V was right last week, that this is a big chapter. So what have we learned today, people? What have we got from all of that? Out of the 4th habit, think win-win. Revelations, observations, questions.
Win-win is expensive. It works on abundance, so it's not.
Oh, expensive. Sorry, I said expensive. It's the accent.
Oh, yeah. Could be.
Expensive. Hang on a minute. Wait. Expensive. Very good, Carly. Well done. I was almost disappointed there for a second, but instead I'm able to be proud of you. So it's expansive. How so, Coralie? Do elaborate.
Oh, well, and also I've found this, like before talking about this today, is when you come up with something that's win-win, then it just keeps expanding and winning all over the place. And
It does. You're right.
yeah, and also with what your little roundup just then, what that really brought to me was that to have win-wins, you need to listen to the other person, because we make a lot of assumptions about, things and about what other people think and what they want. And we don't know if we don't ask them and then listen to the answer.
I could assume that you've read the next chapter from that comment as well.
I might have listened to it, I'm not sure.
Very good. Because that is the next chapter is
Oh, right, yeah.
seek
Let's
first
lead
to
on.
understand and then to be understood. So you're spot on, right on the money there. Yeah, it does. And it does. I love what you said there, how you just once you start win-win, you go win-win all over the place, don't you? Because you've established a principle or an environment of cooperation. You've established a situation where people want to contribute and they want to be part of it and they want to help us get the results because they're winning too. Because we all want to win underneath it all. I know, do people want to lose? You might choose to lose, as we said, if it's for the benefit of a relationship, to make somebody else feel better, or that you might see that there's a long-term win out of it if you let the other person have a small victory. But underneath it all, who really wants to be a loser?
Actually, I was thinking about this, and I think about this a lot when people talk about wanting ill for other people, especially some guys I know are like all about, oh, look, I can't make any money because my ex-wife will get it all. So guess what? He doesn't make any money. His wife gets nothing, but neither does he.
Lose.
Yeah.
He describes that in that chapter, actually, that very example that you've just given. Yeah, that's tragic, isn't it?
It is.
It's
so much about the language. Wanting ill for someone else creates ill will for yourself.
Yeah, and the worst case scenario you hear about, the father that's been estranged from his children because the ex-wife won't let him see the kids, and then he takes the kids and goes and jumps off a bridge with them or something. That's like the extreme example. Worst case, it's like, well, if I can't have them, she can't have them either. It's unbelievable what the depths to which some people will sink into that lose-lose mentality.
It comes back to the misunderstanding and not negotiating.
Yeah, so that was a very clear thing that leapt out at me, because I've used this expression quite a lot myself, is about managing expectations. With my cleaning business, for example, it's very much about managing what the expectations of residents of apartment buildings, what are the standards that they're expecting, what is the standard that the strata manager will expect, and what is the staff. So we have to all be on the same page in terms of what they think we're going to deliver and what we actually deliver. And that's true of any business, really, isn't it? Your customer has to have an expectation about what is reasonable for that product or service to achieve. And if they have a different expectation to the person providing it, that's where the biggest arguments occur, isn't it? Well, I thought it was going to do this. Oh no, I didn't say it would do that. I only said it would do this, but it didn't do that. So isn't it that you could stand at a service desk in a retail store and listen to that all day, and you'll hear numerous examples of that where I thought this, but the other person thought that.
Be clear with our message.
Yeah, but why does that happen? Very often because we don't talk about it in the first place. And you as an accountant, I'm sure, would have seen partnership breakups or business fallouts between directors and so on. And very often, role definition is a key thing. In a marriage, it's a key thing. If you want a relationship to work, If you've I actually had a friend, I remember this one as a little sidebar story, where he was really disturbed because his new girlfriend was sending him text messages and she wasn't putting a kiss at the end of it. And he's
Oh
like,
no.
what does this mean? Does she not want me anymore? Does she not feel the same way? Because a couple of times she had put a kiss and then she didn't, and he was getting all in a tiz about it. Really?
This is the problem with texting.
But yeah, I mean,
messaging.
something as simple as that could be the deal breaker, you know? Well, I thought you were going to squeeze the toothpaste out of this end. There was a thing on the radio the other night about how people cut toothpaste tubes in half so they can squeeze the last little bits out of the two ends of it. What? Oh yeah,
I do
sure.
other tubes, but not the toothpaste.
They're running out of toothpaste. You cut it in half. It's like, oh. So in our life in general, but certainly in business, it's really clear. It's really important that we establish our expectations, because once and that's where written agreements are so important, as I'm sure you'd say, V, as an accountant with clients going into partnership or going into starting a business together. Be clear. What will happen if this happens? What will happen if that happens? If you want to do this and I want to do that, who has the deciding vote, or who has how are we going to negotiate this? And if we can't negotiate it, what happens? If we can't work out a solution, do we go to a tribunal, or is there a third party that gets involved? So it's always, I was going to say it's always hard when it's two partners, one against one, but it might be that it's two against one can be just as hard, because the one might be right, the two are wrong, but the two get their way because they've got the majority. So we're managing these expectations and negotiating around these sorts of things in all areas of our life all the time. Might not even be realizing we're doing it. But if you step back for a moment, when you next get annoyed with somebody about something they've either done or not done, and you think, am I getting annoyed because of my expectation of the way they should be doing whatever it is they're doing? And if I am, do they see it the same way? Have they got the same understanding of what was expected as me? Because they may not have. They might think that they're doing the right thing. You see it in workplace situations all the time, where the employee is like, well, I thought you wanted me to do this. And the boss says, no, I told you to do that. Was it clear? So one of the things I learned early on as a manager was to get staff to repeat things back to me. If I've instructed you to go and do this, tell me what it was that you thought you heard that I've asked you to do. What are we agreeing on that you're going to do? Oh, I'm going to go do this. No, that's not what I just said. Let me go through it again. Because if you do that, if you take the trouble to actually stop and do that, if you have the time and you can make the time to do that, you both get a common agreement of what's expected. And then you're both working towards the same thing on the same page. If one person thinks we've agreed to do this, and the other person has a completely different understanding, we've agreed to do that. That's where it all goes wrong. That's why we take minutes at meetings, because how often do people hear something different from the same meeting?
Yes.
We're all in the same room. How did we hear the different things? Because we're filtering it all the time through our own expectations about how the world ought to work and what we think is going on, what we think we're working towards. And we think that other person is thinking the same way that we are, and they're not necessarily. So really fundamental. That's why getting this right is one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Not 3, 4, or even 5, but 7. I'm sure there might be even more. Oh, he's written a book now called The 8th Habit, hasn't he? So
Yeah.
he did before he died. So yeah, but this is all basic stuff, really, isn't it? When you narrow it down, it really is. They are fundamentals, but they're not if you've never thought about it, or you've never been instructed in that way. If it's never been explained to you why it's important that you get you check the other person's understanding, or you clarify objectives, or you agree on outcomes. If you haven't ever been exposed to thinking about it that way, you may not realize that. So, all right, great session. Stan, did you have anything you wanted to add? I'm hoping you're still there. We have a blank screen, but
Still here. No, it was all good.
okay. Is that it? Is there anything else you want to add there, Stan? Any thoughts? Anything that like resonated with you particularly? You're the one with the youngest kids, I think, in the room at the moment.
And the youngest kids are just leaving the house at the moment. My wife's dressed up as a minion. It's onesie day at school.
Awesome.
Oh no, the
I wish
camera's
we
not
could see that.
working.
Hang on, nigga!
Love it. Excellent. Well, there you go. That was the highlight of the meeting for me.
See the kids now.
So great. So let's all think in terms of win-win this week, and notice if there was any areas where you weren't expecting people to see it differently to how you saw it. Were you actually doing a lose-win without realizing it somewhere? Just being observant of what we've learned in this chapter, and thinking as you come across these situations in your life and in your business going forwards, where you're actually applying this information in a positive way, in a correct way. Okay, people, thank you very much for your attendance. Next week, then, we will go on to habit 5. We'll see if we get into habit 6, maybe if you can get further forward in the reading, but habits 5 and 6 are the rest of that public victory section. Might be a little easier. I think habit chapter 6 is a bit shorter, so let's aim to try to get through 5 and 6. But if we only get through 5, that'll be the way it is. But we'll see, because then that'll take us nicely to sort of summarizing and leading into habit 7. Dun dun dun. So like next week, see how we go. At least habit 5. We'll aim for habit 6 as well if we can. We'll see how we go for time. All right, thanks guys. Have a fantastic week ahead, and I'll see you next week.